has obtained showing that shootout between two biker gangs on the highway. 3 Hells Angels are charged for attempting to kill members of a rival group.
What if I told you that a single refused handshake brought down Australia's oldest motorcycle club in just 72 hours? A club that had survived 6 decades of police raids, rival wars, and internal conflicts. Completely obliterated because one man wouldn't shake another man's hand. But here's the twist that'll blow your mind. This wasn't just any handshake, and the organization that capitalized on this moment of disrespect had been watching, waiting, and planning for the perfect opportunity to strike. Stay with me, because what happened next involves masked riders, burning fortresses, and a strategic takeover so calculated it could have been pulled from a military playbook. Chapter 1. The Fortress. Picture this: Portland Street, Maitland, Australia. For over 60 years, one building dominated this quiet suburban street like a medieval castle dropped into modern suburbia. The Gladiators Motorcycle Club headquarters wasn't just impressive, it was a statement. Towering wrought iron gates designed like a fortress entrance, corrugated iron and dark brick walls that had witnessed decades of outlaw history, security cameras monitoring every angle, floodlights ready to illuminate the entire perimeter at a moment's notice. But here's what made this fortress truly unique, and this detail will become critically important later. The swimming pool. Tiled across the bottom was the Gladiators logo, visible even from satellite images. A bold declaration that screamed, "This is our territory," to anyone watching from above. Founded in 1960, the Gladiators represented something rare in the outlaw world: permanence. While other clubs rose and fell, they endured. Their network stretched across the Hunter Valley, with chapters in Grafton and Gunnedah. These weren't just criminals hiding behind motorcycle culture. They were woven into their community's fabric. They organized the infamous bike, car, and tattoo shows. They hosted boxing exhibitions that drew crowds from across the region. This dual existence, part community institution, part outlaw enterprise, had been their secret weapon for survival. But, as we'll see, this very integration would also become their greatest vulnerability: the culture of respect. Before we dive into that fateful night, you need to understand something most people never grasp about outlaw motorcycle club culture. These organizations operate by codes that have evolved over decades, unwritten rules that can mean the difference between peace and bloodshed. When rival club members encounter each other at events, particularly formal gatherings like annual meetings, there's an elaborate ballet of social interaction. Every gesture carries weight. Every look, every word, every moment of acknowledgement or dismissal is calculated and observed. The handshake ritual serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges the other person's status within their organization, demonstrates respect for their club's existence, and most importantly, signals that despite rivalry or territorial competition, certain civilized standards will be maintained. These protocols exist because without them, every encounter between clubs would potentially escalate into violence. The outlaw world learned long ago that constant warfare attracts unwanted law enforcement attention and disrupts the business operations that actually fund these organizations. But here's the critical part. These respect rituals only work when both parties participate. When someone breaks protocol, especially publicly, it creates a situation that demands response according to the unwritten laws that govern this world. This invisible currency isn't money or drugs or territory. It's something far more dangerous because it can't be negotiated, traded, or bought. Once it's lost, blood is often the only way to get it back. That currency is respect. Chapter 3. The night everything changed. The Gladiators' annual general meeting party started like hundreds before it. Music playing, drinks flowing, the careful dance of outlaw diplomacy unfolding between rival clubs sharing the same space. The atmosphere was reportedly positive initially. Most interactions followed the established social rules that allowed rival organizations to coexist in the same space without violence. It was exactly the kind of event that had allowed the Gladiators to maintain their position for 6 decades. But then came the moment that would change everything. According to the anonymous source who later revealed the true origins of this conflict, A Hells Angels member approached a Gladiators member, extending his hand in the traditional greeting that acknowledges mutual respect between organizations. The Gladiators member looked at the extended hand and walked away. In outlaw motorcycle culture, where respect is literally currency and public perception determines organizational strength, this refusal carried devastating implications. The Hells Angels member, clearly thinking there must have been some misunderstanding, gave the Gladiators member the benefit of the doubt. Later in the evening, he approached again and extended his hand a second time. Again, it was refused. This double refusal created what the source described as a bit of tension, but that understated phrase masked the true significance of what had occurred. Other members from both clubs witnessed these interactions. In a culture where public disrespect cannot be ignored without appearing weak, everyone present understood that this situation had moved far beyond simple misunderstanding into deliberate insult. The Hells Angels member, who was snubbed, faced a critical choice: respond immediately and risk escalating the situation into violence at a social event, or handle the matter through official channels that would involve his club's leadership. He chose the latter, a decision that would prove far more catastrophic for the Gladiators than any individual confrontation might have been. Chapter 4: The Strategic Mind of the Hells Angels. Here's what makes the Hells Angels truly dangerous. They're not just another motorcycle club. They're a global criminal organization with military-level discipline, strategic thinking that spans decades, and resources that dwarf local clubs. The Hells Angels have perfected territorial expansion worldwide. Their approach follows recognizable patterns: intelligence gathering and relationship building, identification of vulnerable clubs weakened by police pressure or internal conflict, then decisive show of force and swift territorial absorption. Instead of responding with immediate violence to the Handshake incident, the disrespected member reported it through proper channels to his leadership. This disciplined response reveals sophisticated organizational thinking. Personal revenge would have satisfied individual pride, but accomplished little strategically. Within the Hells Angels command structure, this incident would have triggered strategic planning sessions. Senior members would have calculated the resources needed for Hunter Valley expansion and evaluated potential law enforcement responses. But most importantly, they would have recognized something outsiders couldn't see. The Gladiators were already internally divided on fundamental questions of leadership and direction. The Handshake incident didn't create these divisions. It provided the perfect catalyst to expose and exploit them. Chapter 5: The Ultimatum That Split a Brotherhood. The formal ultimatum delivered to Gladiators' leadership wasn't simply about punishment for disrespect. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare designed to achieve multiple strategic objectives simultaneously. Deal with your own guy for disrespecting the Angels, or we'll step in and handle it ourselves. This seems reasonable on the surface. Discipline your member who violated protocols, and the matter ends. But experienced club leaders would have recognized the sophisticated trap being set. If the Gladiators disciplined their own member, they would be publicly acknowledging Hells Angels' authority over their internal affairs. If they refused, they would be choosing disrespect over diplomatic resolution, providing justification for escalated response. The genius of this ultimatum was that either choice weakened the Gladiators while strengthening the Hells Angels' position. But what happened next would shatter the club from within before any external pressure was applied. The Gladiators' response revealed fatal internal divisions that had likely been building for years. Half the club agreed they should discipline the disrespectful member and resolve the situation diplomatically. The other half refused, believing they should stand their ground against outside interference. This wasn't just disagreement about one incident. It reflected deeper conflicts about the club's direction, its relationship with larger organizations, and fundamental questions of independence versus survival. When this fracture exploded within the club, it created internal chaos that makes organizations vulnerable to external exploitation. Leadership cannot maintain order when membership splits into opposing factions. Decision-making becomes impossible when every choice faces organized internal opposition. Chapter 6: The Intelligence Game. What happened next reveals just how sophisticated intelligence gathering operates within outlaw motorcycle networks. Word of the Gladiators' internal division would have reached Hell's Angels leadership within hours. These organizations maintain information networks that rival law enforcement agencies in their effectiveness. Club members, associates, business partners, and even rivals serve as unwitting intelligence sources through routine social interactions. But here's a crucial detail that reframes everything. According to the Hells Angels website, their Hunter Crew chapter was officially established in 2025. This suggests expansion into the Hunter Valley had been planned well before the Handshake incident provided perfect justification. The infrastructure for regional expansion was already being developed: leadership structures, recruitment targets, territorial objectives. The Gladiators' internal crisis simply accelerated a timeline that was already in motion. Their existing Steel City chapter in Newcastle provided the operational base for Hunter region expansion. This geographic advantage, combined with their international backing and expansion experience, gave them capabilities that even a unified Gladiators organization couldn't match. Chapter 7. The Storm Arrives. The morning when everything changed began deceptively quietly on Portland Street. Residents went about their routines, completely unaware that their neighborhood was about to become the center of one of the most significant power shifts in Australian outlaw motorcycle history. Then came the sound that would haunt witnesses. Not one or two motorcycles, but the deep, synchronized rumble of dozens of engines approaching in military formation. Up to 50 Hells Angels members arrived at the Gladiators clubhouse, their faces concealed behind balaclavas, creating an intimidating presence that left absolutely no doubt about their intentions. This wasn't negotiation or diplomacy. This was a demonstration of overwhelming force designed to eliminate any possibility of resistance. The visual impact was carefully choreographed for maximum psychological effect. The balaclavas ensured individual members couldn't be identified, while creating an anonymous, faceless threat that suggested military-level organization. The sheer number of participants demonstrated resources that the fractured Gladiators couldn't hope to match. Even if they had been unified and prepared, facing such overwhelming numbers would have been daunting. Divided as they were, resistance became suicidal. Witnesses described the arrival as chaotic, but from an operational perspective, it represented careful orchestration. The convoy's formation, coordinated deployment around the compound, and disciplined behavior of 50 potentially armed individuals suggests tactical preparation worthy of military analysis. Chapter 8. The Ultimatum That Ended an Empire. Standing before the assembled Gladiators members, surrounded by 50 masked Hells Angels, the final ultimatum was delivered with stark simplicity: patch over or get out. 3 words that represented the end of 60 years of independence. In outlaw motorcycle culture, patching over represents the ultimate surrender. Members must literally remove their original club patches and replace them with those of the conquering organization. But it's not simply changing jackets. It's abandoning identity built over years or decades. It's surrendering brotherhood bonds cemented through shared risks and mutual protection. It's accepting subordinate status within the hierarchy of an organization that was previously considered enemy. For many Gladiators members, their club patches weren't just fabric symbols. They were tattooed permanently onto their bodies, representing commitment that transcends clothing and becomes part of physical identity. The binary nature of this ultimatum was strategically brilliant. No middle ground, no negotiation, no gradual transition. Each member had to make an individual choice in that moment, under extreme pressure, without time for collective consultation. This isolation prevented the kind of group solidarity that might have emerged if members had been given time to discuss options and coordinate responses. The human cost of conquest. The immediate aftermath revealed the human cost of organizational conquest. These were real people with decades of relationships and shared history, being forced to make impossible choices under extreme pressure. Some Gladiators members chose to leave the scene entirely, rather than face the choice between submission and confrontation. This represented the only way to maintain personal dignity, while avoiding both the humiliation of patching over and the physical danger of resistance. Others found themselves facing calculations that would haunt them forever. Submit and become the lowest-ranking members of an organization they'd previously considered rivals. Or refuse and face consequences from 50 potentially armed adversaries. The internal division that had preceded this confrontation meant members couldn't even count on unified support from their own brothers. Those who had favored diplomatic resolution might view patching over as logical. Those who had wanted to stand their ground might see this ultimatum as vindication of their concerns. Most tragically, lifelong friendships and brotherhood bonds were being severed in real time, with no opportunity for proper discussion or even respectful disagreement about the best path forward. The fortress burns. Days after the Hells Angels ultimatum shattered the Gladiators organization, the fortress that had stood as a symbol of permanence for 60 years faced its ultimate destruction. Just after 10 a.m. on a quiet Wednesday morning, the peaceful suburban atmosphere was shattered by an explosion that sent black smoke billowing into the Hunter Valley sky. A vehicle, already set alight, smashed directly through those medieval-style gates and into a storage shed, creating an impact that sent flames ripping through structures that had housed decades of outlaw motorcycle history. The timing, broad daylight rather than under cover of darkness, suggested the perpetrators wanted maximum visibility for their message. This wasn't covert destruction. This was a public declaration that the old order had ended. The burning car smashing through those fortress gates represented far more than property destruction. It was the final symbolic erasure of the Gladiators' territorial claims, a fire that would consume not just buildings, but the last physical remnants of 60 years of organizational history. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but the damage was irreversible. The flames had consumed what they were intended to destroy. The discovery of a 63-year-old man at the scene with severe burns, who was subsequently arrested, added complexity to what initially appeared to be straightforward arson. Was he involved in the firebombing, a member trying to defend the property, or an innocent bystander in the wrong place at the wrong time? The investigation and ripple effects, the handover of the investigation to the State Crime Command's Raptor Squad, demonstrated how seriously authorities viewed these developments. Created specifically to disrupt outlaw motorcycle gangs, their involvement signaled this was part of a broader power struggle with regional implications. Forensic examination would reveal burn patterns, accelerant types, and vehicle remnants that might connect to specific individuals. The reported presence of potential bullet casings introduced ballistic evidence that might link to previous incidents. But the real impact extended far beyond one investigation. The speed of the Gladiators' collapse sent shockwaves throughout Australia's outlaw motorcycle landscape. If a 60-year-old club with deep community roots could be eliminated within days, no organization could consider its territory permanently secure. Other clubs across New South Wales began reaching out to offer support to remaining gladiators. But these weren't gestures of friendship. They were pragmatic recognition of a common threat that could affect every independent club. The Hells Angels' response revealed their calculating strategy. Rather than backing down when faced with potential coalition opposition, they bolstered their presence in regional strongholds, demonstrating commitment to permanent presence rather than temporary exploitation. The truth revealed. Here's the most shocking revelation of all. According to the anonymous source who provided the inside account, the Hells Angels didn't start the fire, but just saw an opening and took full advantage. This reframes the entire narrative from aggressive territorial expansion to opportunistic exploitation of internal weakness. The Hells Angels hadn't necessarily planned to destroy the Gladiators through strategic warfare. They simply recognized that the club's internal fracture created perfect conditions for territorial acquisition. The source was devastatingly clear. One Gladiators member refused to shake his hand twice and completely snubbed him. The internal disagreement exploded, leading to the club being shut down nationwide, all because of one member's actions. Think about that revelation. The conflict that brought down Australia's oldest outlaw motorcycle club, that triggered fire bombings and territorial conquest, that mobilized law enforcement and reshaped regional criminal networks. All of it stemmed from a handshake refused twice at a party. Not territorial ambition, not drug trade disputes, not strategic expansion planning. A handshake refused twice, creating a bit of tension that exploded into organizational collapse when the Hells Angels demanded internal discipline and the Gladiators split over how to respond. Lessons and the New Order. Today, the Hells Angels Hunter Crew. Chapter operates from territory controlled by the Gladiators for 60 years. Their systematic expansion, establishing the Hunter Crew to complement their Newcastle Steel City chapter, reveals longer-term strategic planning that extends beyond opportunistic exploitation. The swimming pool at the old clubhouse, with the Gladiators logo tiled across the bottom, visible from satellite images, now lies among scorched ruins. A monument to how quickly power can shift when internal unity fractures at the wrong moment. The complete story provides lessons about power and vulnerability that extend beyond outlaw motorcycle culture. Internal unity represents the foundation of organizational security. Without consensus on fundamental issues, even the most established institutions become vulnerable to exploitation. The handshake incident might seem trivial, but it exposed fractures that made the entire organization indefensible. External pressure often exploits rather than creates internal weaknesses. The Hells Angels ultimatum didn't cause the division. It revealed problems that had been building for years. The speed of collapse, from handshake refusal to organizational destruction in days, demonstrates how quickly decades of careful relationship building can be destroyed when multiple crisis factors converge. In the end, the entire saga comes down to respect, its critical importance in outlaw culture, the devastating consequences of its absence, and the cascading effects when respect systems break down. The Gladiators member who refused to shake hands may have thought he was making a minor personal statement. But in a culture where respect is currency and disrespect demands response, his actions started a chain reaction that consumed his entire organization within 72 hours. The Hells Angels demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both respect protocols and organizational psychology. Their ultimatum forced an impossible choice, knowing that either option would weaken the organization and create opportunities for exploitation. When the club split over this decision, the Hells Angels recognized the opportunity and acted with decisive force that eliminated any possibility of recovery. The firebombing provided the final punctuation mark. The building that had stood as a symbol of permanence for 60 years was reduced to ruins, its swimming pool logo visible among the debris as a monument to how quickly power can shift. The complete destruction serves as a stark reminder that seemingly small actions can have catastrophic consequences. A refused handshake, an internal disagreement, an opportunistic rival. These elements combine to end 60 years of history in less than a week. But this raises an even bigger question. How many other seemingly established organizations are just one internal disagreement away from complete collapse? And who might be watching, waiting for the perfect moment to capitalize on that weakness? The fortress on Portland Street stands as ruins, but the real monument isn't the destroyed buildings. It's the lesson that no empire, no matter how established, is immune to collapse when internal unity fractures and strategic rivals recognize the opportunity. Let me know in the comments what you think about how small actions can trigger massive consequences, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden worlds that operate by rules most of us never see.